The biting Montana wind, carrying the scent of pine and impending snow, was a familiar companion to Dr. Thomas Adler. But on that bleak November afternoon it seemed to whisper a tale of suffering that drew him deeper into the unforgiving embrace of the Absaroka Range. There, amidst the jagged rocks and skeletal aspens, he found her. A broken jewel of the wilderness, a young bobcat whose fight for life was etched in every shallow breath. This is the story of Gracie, as he would come to name her, and the compassionate veterinarian who dared to believe in her healing. It's a journey through the depths of trauma, the painstaking patience of building trust where none should exist, and the profound, unexpected ways in which a wild heart can mend a human soul, leaving an echo of hope that resonates far beyond the confines of a single life. If you're touched by stories of hope and healing, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more incredible journeys. The sight that greeted Dr. Adler was one that would forever sear itself into his memory. Curled into a pathetic, shivering ball at the base of a snow-dusted spruce, Gracie was less a predator and more a victim of the wild's harsh indifference, or perhaps human cruelty. Her tawny fur, usually a perfect camouflage, was matted with dried blood and grime. One hind leg was twisted at an unnatural angle, the bone clearly shattered. Deep gashes, angry and infected, scored her flank and shoulder, telling a silent story of a desperate struggle. But it was her eyes, wide amber pools of undiluted terror, that pierced Thomas's heart. They held no spark of wild defiance, only the dull sheen of encroaching death, and a psychological trauma so profound it seemed to emanate from her in chilling waves. She was perilously thin, her ribs stark beneath her pelt, and the air around her carried the faint, metallic scent of infection and starvation. What made Dr. Adler so determined to save this particular creature, one among many he'd encountered in his years as a wildlife veterinarian? Perhaps it was the sheer vulnerability radiating from her tiny broken form. Or maybe it was the way she didn't even attempt to snarl or defend herself when he slowly approached, a sign of utter resignation that he found unbearable. He'd seen suffering before, the brutal, impartial justice of nature. But this felt different. This felt like a betrayal of something beautiful and wild. In that fleeting moment, as he carefully wrapped her in a thick emergency blanket, her faint, almost inaudible whimper wasn't just the cry of an injured animal. It was a plea that resonated with a deep, almost forgotten part of his own weary spirit. He saw not just a dying bobcat, but a flicker of resilience, a stubborn ember he felt compelled to fan back into a flame. He wouldn't let her light go out, not without a fight. The initial days at the rehabilitation center were a grim testament to Gracie's ordeal. Sedated and on a warming bed, her physical injuries were meticulously addressed. The leg was set, a complex fracture requiring pins and a long recovery. The gashes were cleaned, debrided, and stitched, antibiotics pumped into her frail system to battle the raging infection. But as her body slowly began the arduous process of mending, her spirit remained imprisoned by fear. Confined to a spacious, quiet enclosure, she would press herself into the furthest corner, a low, continuous growl vibrating in her chest if anyone approached. Her eyes, though clearer now, still held that haunted look. Food, even the most tempting morsels of fresh meat, often went untouched if a human was present. She was a wild creature, and humans, or whatever had inflicted such horror upon her, were the enemy. Dr. Adler knew that physical healing was only half the battle. The psychological scars were deeper, more insidious. He watched her through the one-way observation window, his heart aching at her profound distress. The standard protocols, minimizing contact, providing a secure environment, were in place, but Gracie wasn't responding. She was fading, not physically but emotionally, retreating further into a shell of terror. His colleagues, while sympathetic, began to gently suggest that perhaps her trauma was too severe, that humane euthanasia might be the kindest option if she couldn't adapt. But Thomas couldn't accept that. He saw something in her fleeting glances, a spark of awareness, a deep-seated intelligence that he believed could be reached. He decided on an unconventional approach, one that raised eyebrows and invited skepticism. He would enter her enclosure, not to treat her, not to force interaction, but simply to be. His first foray was met with a furious, spitting display. Gracie, despite her injuries, launched herself at the far wall of the enclosure, her small body trembling with a mixture of rage and terror. Thomas sat down quietly on a small stool he'd brought in, just inside the door, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. He didn't look directly at her. He simply sat, breathing slowly, the scent of pine and antiseptic clinging to him. He spoke softly, not to her specifically, but just narrating his thoughts, the weather, mundane observations about the day. He stayed for 20 minutes, then quietly left. He repeated this ritual daily, sometimes twice. Each entry was met with the same initial panic, but slowly, painstakingly, the intensity began to wane. The hisses became less explosive, the attempts to scale the walls less frantic. She would still retreat, still watch him with wary, unblinking eyes, but a sliver of something else was creeping in. Curiosity. He would read aloud from old veterinary journals, his voice a calm, steady drone. He'd bring his lunch, eating slowly, deliberately ignoring her. He never tried to approach, never made sudden movements. His presence was becoming a constant, a predictable part of her environment, and crucially, it was never associated with pain or threat. Weeks turned into a month. The heavy cast on her leg was replaced with a lighter splint. Her wounds healed, leaving behind pale scars on her now fuller body. The true miracle, however, was happening within. One afternoon, as Thomas sat reading, Gracie, who usually remained plastered to the far wall, took a hesitant step forward. Then another. She stopped, her head cocked, ears swiveling, assessing. He continued to read, his heart hammering against his ribs, feigning nonchalance. She crept closer, silent as a shadow, until she was only a few feet away. He could smell the faint, musky scent of her, see the intricate patterns of her fur. Then she sat, her gaze fixed on him, not with terror, but with an intense, searching curiosity. It was a breakthrough, a fragile bridge of trust beginning to form across an immense chasm of fear. Caring for Gracie became a balm for Dr. Adler's own soul, though he wouldn't have admitted it, not even to himself, in the beginning. The veterinary world, especially wildlife rehabilitation, was a demanding, often heartbreaking profession. He'd seen too much suffering, too many lost causes. A quiet weariness had settled in his bones over the years, a subtle hardening around the edges of his deep compassion. Gracie, in her fierce fragility, began to chip away at that. Her resilience was a daily lesson. Every small improvement, every tentative step she took towards him, was a testament to the indomitable spirit of life. He'd arrive at the center some mornings feeling the weight of the world, only to find Gracie watching him from her favorite perch, a recovered log in her enclosure, her gaze steady. It was a silent reminder to keep going, to keep believing. The process of earning her trust taught him patience on a level he hadn't known. There were days of regression, days when a sudden noise or an unfamiliar scent would send her scurrying back into the shadows of her fear, and he'd feel a pang of disappointment. But he learned to accept her pace, to understand that trust, once shattered, is rebuilt one microscopic fragment at a time. He learned the profound power of simple presence. He wasn't doing anything extraordinary in his mind. He was just being there, consistently, calmly, offering a safe space. And in that offering, healing bloomed. One crisp morning, months into their shared ritual, he extended his hand slowly, palm up, a small piece of cooked chicken resting on it. Gracie watched him, her amber eyes unwavering. For a long moment she remained still, a beautiful, wild statue. Then, with infinite caution, She leaned forward, her whiskers twitching as she sniffed the offering, then his hand. Her rough little tongue darted out, taking the morsel so gently it was like the brush of a feather. She didn't snatch it. She accepted it. And in that moment, Thomas felt a connection so pure, so profound, it brought tears to his eyes. She wasn't just taking food. She was accepting him. That day, a small, almost inaudible rumble started in her chest as she ate, a sound he hadn't dared hope to hear. A purr. It was the sound of contentment, of safety. It was the sound of Gracie teaching him that even the deepest wounds could heal, that connection could be forged in the most unlikely of circumstances, and that his work, his dedication, mattered in ways he sometimes forgot. He felt lighter, his purpose renewed, his heart a little less guarded. Gracie was healing him as much as he was healing her. The time eventually came when Gracie's physical recovery was complete. Her leg was strong, her movements fluid and graceful, the wild instincts for stalking and pouncing evident in her play with the enrichment toys in her large, naturalistic enclosure. The question of her future loomed large, a heavy weight on Dr. Adler's heart. The dilemma of release. Ethically, the goal of wildlife rehabilitation was always to return animals to their natural habitat. Gracie was, by birthright, a creature of the Montana wilderness. To keep her captive, no matter how comfortable, felt like a betrayal of her very essence. Yet the practical considerations were daunting. The trauma she had endured, likely at the hands of humans, or perhaps a larger predator drawn to human-altered landscapes, was a stark reminder of the dangers awaiting her. Could she truly survive? She had been rescued as a juvenile, her hunting skills perhaps not fully honed before her injury. Months of captivity, despite their best efforts to minimize habituation, had undeniably left their mark. She associated humans, or at least one human, with food and safety. Would that make her vulnerable? Thomas spent countless hours observing her, consulting with his most trusted colleagues, and wrestling with his own emotions. He'd take her to a larger, pre-release enclosure, remote and wilder, to assess her hunting prowess with live, ethically sourced prey. She was competent, yes, her instincts sharp, but there was a hesitation sometimes, a looking back towards him that wasn't entirely wild. He saw the intelligence in her eyes, but also a shadow of the dependency she had formed. The thought of releasing her, of sending her back into a world that had nearly destroyed her, was agonizing. He imagined her cold, hungry, or worse, facing another brutal encounter. His bond with her was now so deep, the idea of never seeing her again, of not knowing if she was safe, was a personal torment. Yet the image of her confined for the rest of her life, a wild spirit in a gilded cage, was equally unbearable. He knew, with a painful certainty, that her chances of long-term survival in the wild were slim, not just because of her past trauma, but because of the subtle ways she had become accustomed to his presence, the security of her enclosure. Releasing her might be condemning her to a slower, more terrifying fate than the one he had saved her from. The decision, when it finally came, was heartbreaking but clear. Gracie could not be safely released. The risk was too high, the potential for suffering too great. She had become too intertwined with the human world, too reliant on the safety it had ironically provided after such initial brutality, while a part of him mourned the wildlife she would never fully reclaim. A larger part felt a profound responsibility to ensure her continued safety and well-being. A permanent sanctuary was found for Gracie, a reputable facility known for its spacious, natural habitats and commitment to lifelong care for non-releasable wildlife. The day he transported her there was one of the hardest of Dr. Adler's life. He sat with her in her travel carrier for a long time before they left, speaking softly, his hand resting near the mesh. her familiar scent filling his senses. She rubbed against the side of the carrier, her purr a low thrum that vibrated through him. Gracie's new home was beautiful, a vast, tree-filled enclosure with rocky outcrops, a flowing stream, and plenty of places to hide and explore. It wasn't the untamed Montana wilderness, but it was safe, and it was rich with the sounds and smells of nature. Dr. Adler visited her often in the early months, and their bond remained. She would emerge from her den when she heard his voice, her distinctive tufted ears perked, her amber eyes bright with recognition. She would approach the fence line, rubbing against it, sometimes chirping a soft greeting. In this sanctuary, Gracie began a new chapter, not as a wild hunter, but as something equally important, an ambassador for her species. Her story, so poignant and powerful, was shared with visitors. People who came to the sanctuary, often with little knowledge of bobcats or the challenges faced by wildlife, would see Gracie, beautiful, resilient, and undeniably charismatic. They would hear about her traumatic rescue, her long journey of healing, and the unconventional methods Dr. Adler had used to gain her trust. They saw not just an animal in an enclosure, but an individual with a history, a personality, and an undeniable spirit. Her presence became a powerful educational tool. She conveyed, in a way no pamphlet or lecture ever could, the fragility of wildlife, the impact of human encroachment and cruelty, but also the profound capacity for healing and connection. Children would gaze at her in awe, their parents moved by her story. She sparked curiosity, fostered empathy, and inspired donations that helped the sanctuary and other rehabilitation efforts. Gracie, the bobcat who couldn't return to the wild, became a voice for those still out there, a living testament to why their protection mattered. Her calm demeanor around trusted keepers, a legacy of Dr. Adler's gentle patience, allowed for closer, safe observation, providing insights into bobcat behavior that benefited conservation science. Her message was one of resilience, of the enduring power of compassion, and the critical importance of sanctuaries that provide refuge for animals who, through no fault of their own, can no longer survive in their natural world. The ripple effects of Gracie's story extended far beyond the sanctuary gates. At Dr. Adler's Rehabilitation Center, her journey became a legendary tale, a source of inspiration for staff and volunteers. It subtly shifted their approach to animal care, reinforcing the understanding that psychological well-being was just as crucial as physical healing, especially for traumatized animals. Dr. Adler, forever changed by his bond with Gracie, became an even more fervent advocate for patient, empathetic care. He found himself incorporating more elements of quiet presence and trust-building into his protocols, particularly with animals showing deep fear or aggression. He shared Gracie's story at veterinary conferences, not as a boast of a successful outcome, but as a humble account of what he had learned about the profound depths of animal consciousness and the healing power of interspecies connection. The wider community, too, was touched. Local newspapers picked up her story, and it resonated deeply with people who lived alongside Montana's wild heart. It fostered a greater appreciation for the delicate balance of their ecosystem and the tireless work of wildlife rehabilitators. Donations to the center increased, as did the number of people volunteering their time or reporting injured animals, now with a greater understanding of the potential for recovery. For Dr. Thomas Adler, Gracie was more than just a patient. She was a teacher, a confidant, a tiny, furry reminder of why he had dedicated his life to the wild. The lines of worry on his face seemed a little softer. His eyes held a renewed spark. He still faced heartbreaking losses. It was the nature of his work. But the memory of Gracie's purr, of her hesitant trust blooming into affection, provided a deep well of solace and strength. He learned that sometimes the greatest healing doesn't come from medicine or surgery, but from the quiet offering of unwavering compassion and the courage to simply be present. Gracie had shown him the extraordinary resilience of the wild spirit, and in doing so had rekindled his own. Their bond was a testament to the almost magical connection that can form when empathy bridges the gap between two vastly different worlds, leaving an indelible mark on a man's heart, and forever changing the way he walked through his own. In the heart of the wild, and in the quiet courage of a rescued soul, we find the enduring truth that compassion is the bridge between worlds, healing not just the broken, but also the mender. If you enjoyed this story of connection and survival, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next video.